lot about this subject. In that documentary, the documentarian went around to a lot of not just conservative, he went around to a lot of campuses, big campuses, small campuses, and he just arrived on campus and started interviewing people. He tried to interview equity office personnel. They would never talk to him. So it wasn't as if he sort of was selective about, oh, this university is good because they're extremely left-wing. It wasn't like that. He went to small, southern, northern, western. It was actually a very fair sample of American campuses. And he found that distaste for conservatism has escalated into fear and loathing. In the film, we meet Laura Freeberg of California Polytechnic, a conservative academic on the down lows, someone who would not admit that she was conservative because she knew it would not be good for her career. Somebody outed her. Seriously, they did. It was an outing. Her colleagues were aghast, and they said, quote, "We never would have hired you if we'd known you were Republican." In spite of her impeccable academic credentials and stellar teaching ratings, Freeberg was removed as department chair, and a swastika was burned on her lawn. Okay, these are perhaps extreme examples. No academic, I think, has had a cross burned on a lawn here for voting conservative. But in academia, there are only differences of degree. There is no substantive difference in the philosophical and ideological perspectives between US and Canadian universities. The politicization of the social sciences knows no boundaries. Marginalized conservative academics have found their voices in some cases. Historian Eugene Genovese, a Marxist expert on slavery in the American South, and historians who objected to the American Historical Association's imposed ideological line, founded the Historical Society in 1998. The same with literature, the same with the Modern Language Association, and most recently, Fouad Ajami, I'm sure a name that is familiar to many, and Bernard Lewis, of course, the doyen of Islamic studies, formed the Association for the Study of the Middle East and Africa to provide a dispassionate alternative to the heavily politicized Middle Eastern Studies Association, which is 100% out there. One hugely influential discipline is desperately in need of pushback, and I could easily spend an hour on this topic alone at least, and that is women's studies, which is a misnomer for feminist studies. Feminist studies is not a discipline at all, of course. It is a pseudo-discipline. And just to divide discipline from pseudo-discipline, one easy way to know if you're dealing with a real discipline as opposed to a pseudo-discipline, a pseudo-discipline is one that has no basis in direct observation. For instance, astronomy is a discipline, astrology is a pseudo-discipline. So female studies would submit the female sex to objective study. Instead, feminist studies studies gender, which is not a phenomenon, but a theoretical invention. Pseudo-disciplines exist to promote the interests of a belief system or to exalt one group at the expense of another or others. And the best test to know whether it's a discipline or a pseudo-discipline is to ask, what was the history of the founding of the discipline? Did it begin with activism? Then it's a pseudo-discipline. Did it begin in intellectual curiosity? Then it's a discipline. So we have, queer studies, disability studies. A lot of these studies, they began as militants wanting to have a nest in the university and an infrastructure in order to recruit and promote an ideology. And that's what these groups are doing. They are recruitment centers and grooming centers for future policymakers, and they're sending out the troops. So women's studies began in support groups, not in the observation of evidence or from objective curiosity. The purpose is to support political advocacy and to recruit foot soldiers in what Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci called the long march through the institutions. The march through the institutions has been accomplished. Feminists dominate the teaching, social work, psychology, and legal professions at the policy-making level. Politicians hang on every word uttered by the Status of Women Committee. Family court judges are trained by feminist psychologists and sociologues. The media takes as gospel the often bogus statistics and data culled through selection bias and bad methodology, such as opinion polls issued from women's shelters and social service agencies, all branch offices of women's studies. All law enforcement policy with regard to domestic violence in particular is presently based entirely on feminist perspectives and feminism-generated data, much of it demonstrably bogus. A great deal of injustice against boys and men is perpetuated by this legalized imbalance, and combating these injustices has become a cornerstone of my own professional inventory. Feminism has permeated all cultural disciplines, literature, fine arts, whiteness studies. You've heard of whiteness studies, I'm sure. It's not about how great it is to be white. Social sciences, and even in the hard sciences. I have examples from that, but I'll pass over that. We were made rather brutally aware of a feminist idea of gender justice when Larry Summers, president of Harvard University, spoke a truth concerning the relative statistical abilities of men and women in the sciences. Summers holds the distinction of being the only university president forced to resign for speaking the truth, and since it was a truth connected to the sexes, it was feminists who mobbed him and forced their colleagues to fall into line. Skipping over another example. It has been, how am I doing? Okay. It has been 20 years since the term political correctness entered the